There's a secret language in Australia that features some of the rarest sounds ever used by humans. Not only does it have rare sounds, but it's also a language not made by humans. Only a few people on the planet knew it. This is the story of Damin, the secret language of Australia. Today we're traveling to the land down under to look at its strangest language. Not only is this the most unique language of Australia, but it might be one of the most unique languages in the world. To understand what Damin is, we need a bit of context about the people who can speak it. Well, I should say could, because Damin is now an extinct language. This situation makes the mystery around it even stronger. Damin wasn't a language people were born into. It wasn't a language for everyday gossip or trade. It was a secret, ritual language spoken by the Lardil and Yangkaal people of Mornington Island. To hear it was a privilege. To speak it was a mark of manhood. But I'll come back to that in a moment, because this is a key aspect of the language. To understand Damin, you have to understand where it's coming from. The Lardil people are an aboriginal Australian group living in Mornington Island in the Wellesley Island chain in the Gulf of Carpentaria of Queensland. They prefer to be known as Kunhana Manda, people of Kunha, the traditional name for Mornington Island. The Yangkaal are also from the same place, but from a different area of the island. For thousands of years, the Lardil people lived in relative isolation, developing a complex social structure and a deep spiritual connection to the land and sea. In their culture, language was layered. There was Lardil, but for those who had undergone the highest level of initiation, there was Damin. Damin is often described as a secret language, but it's not the most accurate description. It was used as a ritual language, symbolizing the passage from childhood to adulthood. Damin was used by men, and it's not so secret because it was also used outside of rituals. Its main use is the ceremonial aspect to mark the transition from being a boy to being a man. After a young guy went through this ritual, he learned Damin really fast, sometimes in just a single day. And this is because it did not have many words, which made it easy to remember the vocabulary. But getting the hang of the tricky sounds was something that took your whole life. While they were going through this initiation, the men were not allowed to speak Lardil. They absolutely had to use Damin. It served as a kind of in-between language, helping to set the guys who were initiated apart from those who were not, and distinguishing the sacred things from the everyday stuff. It fostered a sense of shared, secret knowledge around them. What makes Damin truly extraordinary is the sounds found in the language. They are found nowhere else in Australia. If you ask a linguist what makes Damin special, they will point to its phonology, the sounds used to build words. Generally speaking, click sounds, like the ones you hear in Xhosa or Zulu, are only found in the languages of southern and eastern Africa, nowhere else. Except that Damin is the only language outside of Africa to naturally use clicks. But it does not stop here. Damin features sounds that are unique to it alone. It has ingressive nasals. Most human speech happens while we exhale, which is aggressive. Damin has sounds that you make when inhaling through the nose. Ingressive. It has a bilabial flap. Imagine vibrating your lips together like a raspberry sound, but as a distinct, controlled consonant.
Bra, a bra.
It also has the adjective L, a sound made by a sudden burst of air through the side of the tongue. These are just a few examples. But it turns out that most of the sounds in the language are quite uncommon among languages in the world, and even more among Australian languages. Linguists like Ken Hale, who studied the language in the 1960s and 70s, were stunned. Damin did not just borrow sounds from Lardil, it invented an entirely new phonetic inventory. But where does that language come from? Sure, it's used in rituals, but where is it coming from exactly? Did people really just make up this language? According to Lardil tradition, Damin was not invented by men. It was a gift from a mythic ancestral being. This gave Damin a divine status. It was not just a tool for communication, it was a bridge between humans and the divine. It was considered the proper way for an uninitiated man to address his peers and elders during ritual periods. On the other hand, some linguists, after studying the mythology of both the Yangkaal and Lardil people, speculate that it was the Yangkaal elders who invented Damin and passed it on to the Lardil. As I mentioned earlier, only two groups know Damin, the Lardil and the Yangkaal. It's often associated with the Lardil, but its actual origin likely comes from the Yangkaal. Both speak two different languages, but from the same language family. The truth is, we cannot tell the exact origin of the language for sure, same as we cannot tell the exact origin of the lexicon of Damin. While Damin is incredible when it comes to phonology, it's also astonishing when it comes to its lexicon. While everyday Lardil has thousands of words, Damin is incredibly lean. It only has about 150 to 200 roots. And here comes a real question. How do you describe the entire world with only 200 words? It doesn't seem like a lot. To do that, you use semantic abstraction. In Damin, one word covers a vast range of related concepts. For example, the word Louis covers all liquids, water, blood, juice, and even the sea. The word Kuri is used to denote the opposite or to mean not. It's added to other words to create new ones. For example, Tuku, one. Kuri tuku, many. Or in other words, not one. Kurishpi, short. Kuri kurishpi, long. Or in other words, not short. Damin only has two pronouns. A, me, and u, not me. To give a comparison, Lardil has 19 pronouns. Grammatically, the Damin registers of the Lardil and Yangkaal use all of the grammatical morphology of these languages, and so therefore are broadly similar, though it does not employ the phonological condition alterations of that morphology. Damin is spoken by replacing the lexical roots of ordinary Lardil words with Damin words. Apart from a leveling of grammatical animals, the grammar remains the same. I mentioned in this video that Damin was no longer spoken. This is because the tragedy of Damin is the same tragedy that befell many indigenous cultures. The cultural traditions of the Lardil and Yangkaal have been in decline for several decades, and the Lardil and Yangkaal languages are nearly extinct. Actually, Yangkaal is extinct, while Lardil is barely surviving. The last Warama ceremony was held in the 1950s, which is the ceremony where Damin was used. So nowadays, Damin is no longer in use by either the Yangkaal or the Lardil. With the arrival of missionaries on Mornington Island in the early 20th century, traditional initiation ceremonies were discouraged or outright banned. The missionaries saw the Warama ceremony as heathen, since Damin was tied directly to these rituals. When the rituals stopped, the transmission of the language also stopped. By the time linguists arrived to document the language in the mid-20th century, there were only a handful of elders left who could actually speak it fluently. The last fluent speaker of Damin, a man named Gulbalaye, passed away several decades ago. However, recently, a revival of cultural traditions has begun. It remains to see whether Warama ceremonies will also be reactivated. Damin is now a dormant language, but on Mornington Island, the pride in the heritage remains. It stands as a symbol of the intellectual depth of the Lardil people, a gift from a divine being transmitted by the ancestors and symbolizing an important cultural aspect. When a language vanishes, so does a distinct perspective on the world. Their influence can still be felt, and while Damin is not used anymore, Lardil is still spoken. But it is in a situation of endangerment and will likely disappear in the future. That is, if nothing is done to preserve it, it might follow the same fate as Damin.